everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's really great to see so many people in the audience. Thank you so much. Welcome to the performance of Albert Einstein, Relatively Speaking. At the end of the performance, there will be time for questions and hopefully credible answers. Einstein once remarked that imagination is more important than knowledge. So, with that in mind, let's imagine that we are gathered in Einstein's living room in his home in Princeton, New Jersey. He is accustomed to entertaining visitors who are interested in knowing more about his life and his discoveries in physics. The year is 1948, and Professor Einstein has made Princeton his home since 1933, when he came here as a refugee from Germany. One of the reasons he chose Princeton was to continue his research at the Institute for Advanced Study. For the past 15 years later, he has rarely left his new home, preferring to divide his time between the Institute and his domestic life. And here he is now, Professor Albert Einstein.
I didn't know that my living room could accommodate so many people. Well, I'm afraid that my housekeeper is not here today. Otherwise, she would be serving you a tea and lemon pound cake. Yeah, but I hope that I will be enough for you. Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming. Very often people will come to the house, students and tourists, and they wish to meet with me and to talk about my life and my work. Allow me to remove the overcoat. Oh no, I wanted to show you something. Yeah, before I came here, I was stopping by my neighbor's house, the little girl Adelaide. She's having some trouble with the mathematical homework. And last week she came to the house with a plate of cookies to ask me if I would help her with her homework. And yes, I said I would. So now it has become a practice of mine, and today she gave me a little present. Yeah, a yo-yo. Well, I am trying to learn the physics of the yo-yo because my grandson will be visiting me shortly, and I wanted to show him what I have learned. I will show you what Adelaide taught me to do. She's only 8 or 9 years old. Yeah, you see? That's pretty good. Yeah. And today I learned to do 2 more tricks. This one, whoa. And then she said there's something called over the rainbow. Now I don't know if I can do this. I will try. Yeah. That's pretty good. Yeah. So I am working every day at the Institute of Advanced Studies. I do not have to teach unless I want to. Otherwise, I am pursuing my own work. And I will tell you a little bit about my work if you are inclined to listen. Yeah. Yeah, well, people, when they first meet me, they are surprised to find out that I was once a child. In fact, when I was born, my family was worried about me. My grandmother said, "Oh my God, he is such a fat little baby." And my mother thought that there was a problem with my head because the back of the head was a little bit larger than it should be. And we had a housekeeper then. I don't know, I was only a little baby, but she thought I was going to be slow when I grow up because I did not speak at the same age that other children would begin to speak out loud. Not because I was not very bright, because I wanted to make sure that the words I said were correct. Yeah, so I would whisper them to myself. And then when I was sure that I had the right words in the right order, I would speak them out loud, very concisely and very slowly. Well, you can imagine, my family was crazy. They said, "Oh my God, the poor little boy will be slow all his life." Yeah, so that is part of my childhood. Today is my birthday. I did not realize I would live to be so old. I was born in, I forget, 1879 in the city of Ulm, Germany. And my father was a featherbed salesman, and it had a nice little life. And I don't remember, of course, because I was just born. But then my uncle Jacob convinced my father to get rid of the featherbed, and we all going to move to Munich, because my uncle said, everybody wants to have electricity in their homes now. It was something very new. And this is what we should do, make the generators for the people. So we all moved to Munich in a big apartment. We had one floor. My uncle Jacob and his family had the other floor. And I remember one day my mother said to me, "Albert, come here, I want to tell you something." And she said, my mother was Paulina. She said, "Albert, we're going to bring you a new toy very soon for you to play with. You can, yeah." Well, I was excited because I had my own little toys. I had blocks I could make things out of, and I had a little steam engine. I enjoyed to be by myself and to play by myself. I did not like to go outside and to play roughhouse with the other boys, and they called me a big bore for that reason. I was more comfortable in the house, and I could do things that require concentration, like to build the house of cards. One time, I remember, I made it 14 stories high. Yeah, and then it was blown down by my sister. Yeah, but I was so angry. I had a terrible temper when I was a little boy. Well, I should tell you about the toy. Finally, my mother come home. I was about 2.5 years old. She said, "Albert, come here. I want to show you the new toy." She had something in her arms like this. It was wrapped in the blanket. So I went over and I looked under the blanket. I said, "Mama, where is the new toy? Where are the wheels? What kind of toy is this, Mama?" And this is my little sister. Yeah. We call her Maya. Yeah. And well, I would grow to love her, but when we was children and I had a bad temper, one time she did something, I don't know, maybe she was the one who knocked over the cards. I pick up my father's bowling ball, and they made it out of wood, and I threw it at Maya and I hit her. And she went crying in the hand, telling my mother, "Oh, I got into a lot of trouble for that." Another time I threw a little toy back at her because she was interfering with what I was doing. We also had a tutor who would come to the house to instruct me in playing the violin. My mother insisted that I learn music. She was a wonderful piano player. And so one day the tutor upset me. So I picked up a chair, and you know what I did with it? I threw it at her, and I hit her. And she ran out of the house, and she never come back. Yeah. Well, people say that there is a rumor that I was not a very good student when I was in the second grade, that I was a little slow to catch up. And that, I must tell you, it is just a rumor. There is no truth to that. If I was interested in something, I would pay attention. If I was not interested, I would not pay attention. And sometimes, especially when I was older, I thought that I knew more than the teachers, which did not make me a very popular student. Yeah. And so I would also speak in class very slowly. But I must tell you that I got very good grades. So don't believe what they tell you, that Einstein was a slow learner. It's not true. Yeah, if it was interesting to me, yeah, that's one story. And so what about my father and mother? They are trying to make a new life for themselves in this new business in electrical generators. And for a while, they were getting contracts to light up one city or little village, because this, as I told you, was very new for people to have electricity on the streets and in their own homes. And one time I was sick. I was 4 or 5 years old. And my father come home, Hermann, and he gave me a little present. I was in my office earlier today looking at some old things. You know how you look at memories Well, what I wanted to show it to you. Let me see. I still have it that my father gave me. Do you know what this is? Yeah, it is a compass. Yeah. And well, whether I am in the bed and no matter how I turn the compass, the needle will always return to the same direction. And I have to ask myself, what is going on? What is the reason for this? And I think that was the beginning of my career as a scientist, to try to understand what are the hidden forces in nature that are responsible for what we see around us. Now, I did not use those words when I am 4 years old, but that was the instinct that I had to understand what is behind the curtain. I want to see for myself, yeah? Perhaps you have felt that kind of curiosity. It has been with me all my life to understand, to investigate, yeah? And also to use my imagination often. Well, we'll talk about that later. We had a student come to the house. His name was Max Talmud. We was a Jewish family, and so we like to have a student come, and we give him a nice meal. We give him company to make him feel at home. Well, Max was older than me, but we were very compatible. And he would always bring me a little present every time he come to the house. He brought me a book of geometry, and and so I studied all the theorems, and I tried to solve the Pythagorean theorem, and I did, yeah. And then he brought me 20 volumes on the history of popular science, or the popular history of science, I forget. Yeah, I started to read them when I was 10 years old. It took me 2 years. But I read them all, and what I discovered was my heroes. My first heroes were the great adventurers in science, the ones who would risk everything in the pursuit of truth and beauty, no matter what it would cost them. And Copernicus, for instance, he was my first big hero when I learned that at one time people thought that the Earth is the middle center of the universe, and everything goes around the Earth. I don't want to offend anybody. Perhaps there is somebody here who still believes that. I don't wish to disappoint you. But he said, no, I'm afraid you're wrong. No, it is the other way around. You see, the sun is the center. When the planets, they go around the sun. And they said, you are crazy. Look, the Earth does not move. If the Earth moved, when we jump up, we would come down in a different place. Yeah, and well, I will show you. You see, I jump up, I come down in the same place. The Earth does not move. Well, he went against what was common sense in those days. And then his successor, another great hero of mine, Galileo Galilei in Italy in the 1600s, he said, yeah, Copernicus is right. The Earth is not the center. Through his own observations, he saw the moon circulating the planet Jupiter. So how can the Earth be the center when we can see that Jupiter has its own moons? Well, you know, the Pope had him come to Rome, and he wanted Galileo to say, no, I am wrong, Your Excellency. You are correct. The Earth is the center. But he did not. He would risk everything for pursuit of truth and beauty. So they give him house arrest when he is an old man. Giordano Bruno, another hero, he did not recant. And what did they do to him for believing the same thing? That the Earth is not the center? They burned him at the stake. Yeah. So these were the people that I admired, I looked up to. And one of the greatest of my heroes was Isaac Newton. He was an English scientist, perhaps the greatest ever since Aristotle. And I admired him so much. His physics was important for the advancement of humanity for hundreds of years. In fact, he was born, I think it was 1 year after Galileo passed away. Sometimes I imagine that Galileo's spirit jumped into Newton. Yeah, yeah. But so my own ideas, they don't come out of nowhere. I have certain people that I learned from. and I incorporate their ideas. Well, we can talk about that later. So what was I telling you? We are in Munich, and my father's business is not doing very well. They are losing contracts. So my uncle Jakob convinces my family to go to Italy. Yeah. He said there are more opportunities there. I have some associates. They will put us into a new business, making the generators. So the whole family, except for one person, me, they all go to Milan. I have to stay in Germany to finish the, well, we call high school. I was 14, 15 years old. Well, I did not want to stay in Germany. I despised the high school. I despised the way the teachers were teaching us. They treated us like little soldiers. We had to memorize everything. We had to stand up and repeat what they told us. What kind of learning is that? They did not encourage curiosity or imagination. Well, off my family went, and I was so despondent. I missed my family, especially my little sister Maya. So in desperation, I went to the family doctor, and I told him, if I continue going to this school, I will have a nervous breakdown. And so he wrote a letter, and I brought it to the headmaster. He read it, and it said that Albert is suffering from depression and anxiety. You must excuse him from attending the classes. Well, I could see a little smile on the headmaster's. Yeah, he couldn't have been happier. I was doing very well in mathematics and science. My other subjects, well, I did not pay much attention in class. But anyways, he let me leave. So I took the train all by myself, age 15. I went to Milano, and there my family was very surprised to see me. My father said, "What are you doing here, Albert? You're supposed to be in Germany finishing your high school." It was the winter time, so I had nothing to do but to read, to explore the countryside, to learn about the culture. Finally, my father sat me down and he said, "Albert, what are you going to do for your future? You know, son, I want you to be an engineer like your Uncle Jakob." I said, "No, I don't want to be an engineer. I want to be a knight of reason, like Galileo, Copernicus, Newton." He said, "Well, now you are nothing but a high school dropout." Well, how about if I go to Zurich and I take the entrance exam to the Polytechnic Institute? Yeah. Well, he was a little reluctant at first, but finally he agreed to let me go by myself to Zurich. I took the entrance exam at the age of 16. How do you think I did? No, I didn't. I did very well in the science, yeah, and the mathematics, but I failed all the other subjects. And I don't know what you can call him, the headmaster said, "Well, I can tell Herr Einstein that you have a promising future, but you have to learn to study. So why don't you come back in 1 year and take the exam again?" So I told my father, and he made arrangements for me to go to a little town in Switzerland, Aarau, and to live with the Professor Jost Venteler and his family. Professor Venteler was a teacher in another high school. And well, this one was very accommodating to me because the professors encouraged all the students to pursue their own interests. They rewarded curiosity and imagination, and I think that was the beginning for me of where we call them Gedanken experiments, thought experiments, that you will picture something in your mind and to think about it, yeah? But the best part was living with Jost Venteler and his family because he had a beautiful daughter, Marie Venteler. Oh my God. She was my first love, with the brown hair and the brown eyes and the soft-spoken voice. And I discovered for the first time that I am really a poet at heart. So I began to compose little poems for Marie, and I would put them in places where I knew she would find them, like under her pillow. My mother and father were very, very happy. They liked Marie Ventler, and they hoped that one day we would get married. Well, after 1 year, I took the entrance exam again, and guess what? This time, I pass. Yeah, so now I am a student, and I moved myself to Zurich. I am 17 years old, and I am a student. I have my own apartment, and I can live the life that I dreamed of living. I can go to the cafes. I can order iced coffee. Yeah, I can take long walks in the countryside, and I am loving the life. And I am studying, my focus was on science and physics. And my father still insists that I will become an engineer, but that's not what I want to be. And my first day in the physics class, there was only 6 or 7 students. And our professor was Hermann Minkowski. And who should walk in but a woman, a young woman. She was the only woman in the whole class, and one of the few women in the institute. And well, I could tell right away she was brilliant by her answers to the questions the professor asked, by the questions that she would ask. So I become very interested in Mileva. And when it was Christmas break, Marie Ventler, my first sweetheart, was expecting that I would return to Arles, Switzerland, to spend the holiday with the family. I had to write to her mama to say that, well, things have changed. I'm afraid that I won't be able to come home this Christmas. And I did not want to upset her too much or to break Marie's heart, but nevertheless, my whole interest had changed. I felt more sympathetic with Mileva. She was more like me than Marie Ventler was. Mileva wanted to be a scientist. She was interested in physics. She was interested in the great questions of the time. What is light? How fast can light travel? What is energy and matter? How are they connected? These are the things that we would discuss till the late time at night. We would go to the cafes, and we would order iced coffee, of course, yeah, and discuss these things. And little by little, we fell in love with each other. My mother was not happy. She had met Mileva. She said, Albert, my dear boy, she is older woman than you by 3 years, and she is not Jewish. And besides, I don't like her. Yeah. But Mama, I do like her. We are going to get married when we finish school. Well, 4 years passed, we take the final exams, and I pass. I was not at the top of the class, but I was pretty close. And now I am qualified to teach physics and mathematics in the high schools. But Mileva, she failed the final exams. Yeah, in fact, she took them twice, and both times she failed. I can't explain that except to say that she was spending too much time with me and not enough on her studies. Well, the only reason that I passed the math exam was because I asked my friend Marcel Grossman to give me his class notes. I never went to any of the classes. Yeah, and I blew up the lab, the physics lab. So I was making enemies of many of the professors. But I passed. I was a graduate, but I didn't have a job. I applied to be a graduate assistant, and I sent my applications to universities around Europe. Well, what kind of response do you think I got? Nobody wanted to hire me. No. Sometimes they would not even respond to my letter. And I thought it was because of my physics professor, Hermann Minkowski, that he was writing a bad recommendation to me, to the professors in the other institutes. Don't have anything to do with this young man. He's nothing but trouble. So what I'm going to do, Mileva has gone back to Serbia to be with her family. We still want to get married, but I told her, look, if I don't have work, I don't have money, I cannot support us. So I was desperate. I become, in my desperation, a substitute teacher. Yeah. Well, it was payback for all the times I lost my temper and threw things, because the students would sit there and they would throw things at me. Then I become a tutor for a little boy from England who his parents wanted him to learn mathematics. That only lasted for a while. I had a fight with his father, and he fired me. So then I turned to my friend Marcel Grossman, who helped me pass the mathematics exam. I said, Marcel, I am desperate. Can you help me find work? Well, by now he was going to become a mathematics professor. And so he wrote to his father. His father said, there will be an opening in Bern, Switzerland at the patent office. Why don't you tell young Albert to go and apply for the position? Well, I was confident that they would hire me. Why shouldn't they? I had a university degree. So I closed my apartment in Zurich. I took the train to Bern. I got a new apartment, and I applied for the position. I had to wait for a while, but they hired me. Third-class patent expert, third floor of the building. I think it was the third floor. Could have been the fourth. I don't remember. And actually, I like the position very much. Every day I would sit behind the desk. Actually, it was a very tall desk. I would stand up and I would examine patent applications for different kind of inventions, and I would have to approve it or disapprove it. And this would, I had to write a report for every single one. And this improved my analytical skills, and I became a much more concise writer, and I enjoyed this work, you know. One of the things at that time was, how do you synchronize clocks? Perhaps now you assume that the clocks are synchronized so that you don't worry about this. But at that time, in 1903, 1902, it was a problem, because maybe it will be at 8 o'clock at this train station, but when you get to the next, but in some other train station, it is maybe 10 past 8. Yeah, so they were not synchronized, and so there was many applications, patents for synchronizing the clocks. In Switzerland, when the supervisor wasn't watching me, I would open the drawer on my desk and take out little scraps of paper, and I would write on them my own thoughts. There was things boiling in my brain, and I had to get them down on paper so I wouldn't forget them. And when he would come back around, I would quickly close the drawer. Yeah, this was my own advanced institute of studies. Well, because I had a good work, I had 48 hours of work a week, 6 days a week, and a good salary for that time. We get married. Yeah. I should tell you, though, that when she was in Mileva was in Serbia with her family, she wrote to me to tell me that she is going to have a child. Well, this was very distressing and also very, very, very wonderful news. But Mileva said, if I come back with the child, it will ruin your career when people understand that we are not married and yet we have a child. So what are we going to do? And I said, well, why don't we wait first, have the child, and then we will decide. Well, she had the child. It was a little girl. We called her Liseul. And we decided, I am sorry to say, to give the child up for adoption. Well, I never saw Liseul, and Mileva never recovered from the loss of this little child. And it changed her whole attitude toward me, I think, and toward life in general. But nevertheless, she come back to Zurich, and we get to Bern. We get married, and I don't know what was young. 1 year later, we have our first little boy, Hans Albert. And meanwhile, I am still working at the patent office. And when I am 26 years old, I published 5 papers in a very prestigious journal on physics. It is published in Berlin, Germany, and it attracts the attention of other scientists. I do not have a PhD. I did publish a paper when I was 16 years old or 15, but these papers, the people are paying attention. Who is this Einstein guy? Yeah, but I'm still working at the patent office, and as I said, I am getting a good salary. One of the papers, the name of the paper was and the translation on the English is on the electrodynamics of moving bodies, which has come to be known as the theory of special relativity. I don't know, would you like to hear a little bit about the theory? Yeah, okay. If you come to my apartment in Bern at that time, you were likely to see me sitting in my chair, smoking something, rocking the little baby on the writing, scribbling in my notebook. That was my life. And at one point, before I get married, I met two gentlemen. I put an ad in the paper for tutoring. And these two young men came to my apartment before I get married. And we discovered we have so much in common that I forget about tutoring them. And we call ourselves the Olympia Academy to make fun of the academics. But we would get together, and of course we would go to the cafes. We would smoke, and we'd discuss the great themes in science and also literature, in philosophy, and we become very strong together. When Mileva comes back, she felt isolated from me. We had been collaborators at one time. I would share my thoughts and my theories with her. And because of her brilliance, she could help me refine and clarify certain ideas. And she would always check my mathematics. But now she sees me with these two young men. We are close together, and she feels estranged from my life. And that might have been the beginning of the end for our marriage, but that is another story. So so what am I telling you about? Relativity, special relativity. In a short way to explain, it is about how do you measure motion between two bodies or two objects that are in different frames of reference. Yeah, one perhaps is stationary and the other one is moving. Yeah, but how do you measure motion? And that was what concerned me. Movement, motion, yeah. And Galileo, he was the one in the 17th or 16th century, he's the one who said, all motion is relative. What in the world does that mean? That's very simply all motion. You don't know you are moving except in relation to something else. If there was nothing else around you, you don't know. You could be moving, you could be still. You don't know. Yeah, have you experienced that? Perhaps you have been on a plane and it is traveling at a very great speed and there is no turbulence outside. The windows are closed. You don't know you are moving, but you are, you see. When you open the window and look out, you are moving. You see, you're looking down at the ocean or the land. So in relation to that, you know you are moving. And the reason why we don't feel the motion, well, how fast is the Earth rotating? 1,000 miles per hour. Traveling around the sun in its orbit 10,000 miles per hour. But we don't experience that because we are moving with the Earth. If the Earth was to collide into another planet, then you would know you are moving. Yeah, you would go flying at the speed of 10,000 miles per hour. Yeah, so if you can devise a way to know that you are moving without having something else around you, you will be the next Aristotle or the next Newton. Yeah, that was the problem. How do you measure motion? Well, you need something that is conceivably at rest. Yeah, you will agree with me? Newton said, well, what is at rest? For our purposes, we can say the Earth is at rest, and we can make measurements in relation to the Earth. But he knew that the Earth is moving, and he knew that it was moving around the sun. His own physics was based on those contentions, that the Earth will be a point of reference, a stable thing. But now he knew, and we all know, there's nothing that is still in the whole cosmos. Everything is moving all the time. Well, Newton, he had a different conception. He believed that space and time, they are absolute. They have nothing to do with each other. Space does not move. It is an absolute frame of reference. It is always the same. It doesn't change. That is what Newton believed. And scientists for 200 years believe that too. So we can make measurements of motion in relation to absolute space. And he also said the same thing about time. What is time? He said it has nothing to do with you. It is like a river that flows on its way. It doesn't care 2 cents about you. And it is the same, he said, intervals of time, they are the same for everybody, no matter where you are. 1 hour is 1 hour here, 1 hour is 1 hour on Jupiter or in another galaxy. 1 inch is 1 inch. It does not change because it is absolute. In fact, I have here the clock that he believed governed the whole universe. Well, not really, but yeah. 1 hour is 1 hour, you see. Well, somebody asked me once, Professor Einstein, will you give me a simple explanation of relativity? Well, I said, all right, let me see. Well, suppose you are sitting next to a very hot stove. Then very hot. 1 minute will feel like 1 hour. But on the other hand, if you are sitting next to a very handsome young man or a pretty young girl, then 1 hour will pass like 1 minute. Yeah. So the experience of time is not absolute. It is relative to what you are doing, who you are with. But there's more to the story than that. And it took me, I would say, 10 years from the time I am 15 till I'm 26 years old. When I'm 15, I had my first thought experiment. I tried to imagine what it would be like if I could run up against a beam of light. Perhaps I could ride a beam of light, or I could run after a beam of light. What would I experience? What would I see? What would happen to time and space? I didn't have an answer, but what I did have was a question, because it was a Scottish inventor, scientist, great man, James Clerk Maxwell, 1865 or so. He determined that the speed of light, it is invariant. It doesn't change. Well, that doesn't sound like too much today, but in a long time, not that long ago, scientists would say, the speed of light, it depends upon if you are moving towards the source of the light or you are moving away from it. If it is moving toward you or it is moving away from you, the speed of light will change. But Maxwell said, no. The speed of light in a vacuum will always be the same. Well, why don't we do a little experiment? Are you with me? So here is the train. The train is going this way, 60 miles an hour. And if I have a ball and I am playing catch with somebody on the train, I am throwing the, wait, I forget which way is the train moving. It's going that way. Okay, and I'm throwing the ball that way. The person who is catching, and I'm only throwing the ball at about, 5 miles an hour. The train is going 60 miles an hour. So you are waiting for the train, and 2 have already passed by. You are waiting for the next one. But you see the train go by. You see Professor Einstein throwing the ball. My question to you is, from your point of view, from your frame of reference, how fast is the ball going? Well, I will give you a little hint. Galileo said that you can add speeds.
65.
Yeah, that is correct. You are correct. And Galileo was correct. So you add the speed of the train to the speed of the ball. Okay? But from my frame of reference, inside the train, the ball is going how fast? Yeah, 5 miles an hour, which is correct. They are both correct. It depends upon your frame of reference. So this is the first step to understand what is relativity. You have a frame of reference. I have a frame of reference. And Galileo said the laws of physics are the same in every frame of reference. They don't change. If you're on a ship, in a plane, if you're in a room, everything you did on the ship, you can do in the room. They don't change. Well, he had a wonderful analogy about people below the deck of a ship. They could play ping pong, they could eat, there could be a little goldfish in the bowl, and all the motions would be the same on the ship as you could do on the land. But suppose we add a little complexity to this simple demonstration, and let me see if I have this here, a beam of light. I always forget the darn thing. Yeah, here it is. Now, I am an engineer on the train, and I am standing in the front, flashing the light. You can see the light. It is real light. And what is the speed of the light, by the way? 100 and? Yeah, per second. So you could swim around the Earth 7.5 times in 1 second. That's the speed of light. Yeah. Well, if you can swim, I don't. So now we know what the speed of the light and the speed of the train. So what is the new speed of the light? Yeah, well, you are smart. Yeah, because it is invariant. It does not change. It is the same in every single frame of reference. And if I shine it out as the back of the train, you cannot deduct the speed of the train from the speed of the light. It is still the same, 186,000 and so on per second. Well, this was a conflict with what Newton said in his laws of motion. He has 3 laws of motion that he arrived at when he was only 22, 23 years old. He was a smart boy. So if he was correct, there is no final end to how fast something can go. As long as you can apply an external force, then there is no limit. But we know from what Maxwell said there is a limit. That limit is the speed of light. Took me 10 years to resolve the conflict, and the resolution was the theory of special relativity. So what I finally realized was scientists believe that light is a wave, and therefore it needs a medium through which it will move. Sound will move through the air. Ocean waves will move through the water. Therefore light has to have a medium, and they called the medium the ether. Nobody had ever seen the ether or measured it. So I said, well, suppose we just get rid of the ether. And we know the light is moving in a vacuum at a certain speed. Then I remembered something. I remembered another story from Galileo. I am trying to resolve this conflict between Newton and the theory of electromagnetism, according to Maxwell and Faraday. Yeah, that light is invariant in its speed. Yeah. So that is where we are. It occurred to me, let us do a thought experiment together. Now, once again, Professor Einstein is on the train, and it is still traveling at 60 miles an hour. But this time, he has a mirror, and I put the mirror on the floor of the train, and there's another mirror on the roof of the train. And I take my light, and I flash the light at the mirror up there. Well, it bounces off that mirror and returns to this mirror here. From my point of view here, where does the light fall? There. Right there at the feet, on the foot, right directly below me, up, down in a straight line. But you are watching as the train is still going by. You're missing another train. Very large glass windows, you're watching in. Do you see the light go straight up and down? Well, you can confer with your partner. The train is moving, you see. From your frame of reference, the light appears to be coming down at an angle. And the base of the angle is the distance the train has moved in a certain direction. Therefore, the light seems to be moving, it is traveling at a greater distance than if it was to go straight from up there to straight down. Now, you know there is a simple equation, and it is, maybe you learned this in school, speed is nothing more than distance divided by time. Newton would say that distance and time, distance is measure intervals of distance, space, in other words, space. Distance and time, they're absolute. The only thing that you can change is the speed. You can change that as much as you want, and there is no limit. You can go 1 million miles an hour. But this thought experiments revealed something to me. If it is true that you will see that the light is traveling a greater distance, the distance has changed. What has not changed is the speed of the light. Therefore, Newton was wrong. Yeah. So it is that distance or space and time, they are relative to how fast you are going. This is just the opposite of what Newton was saying. Then my colleague said, you are in very dangerous territory here. If you challenge the great Newton, your career will be smashed on the rocks. But I don't care. I knew this was true. And I was convinced. Of course, I had to work out the equations. This is another story, the mathematical formula foundation of these ideas, which I did in the papers that I published in 1905 when I am 26 years old. We're going to do one more thought experiment. If I put you all, no, I'm going to put the people on this side of the room in a glass rocket ship so that we can look inside, because down here we have a powerful telescope and a stethoscope. So we can listen to your heartbeat, we can watch you, and we're going to launch you into space toward a distant star. And then you will get there and come back. And let us see. Perhaps you are leaving behind your identical twin. Who would be this lady here in the green? Yeah, what is your name? Jan and Gail. Yeah, you are both 25 years old. Yeah, for the purposes of the Gedanken experiment, yeah, you are 25, yeah, but you are going into space, and unfortunately you have to work. Yeah, so off you go, and we say goodbye to all of our friends in one big ship, and off you go into space, and as you get closer to the speed of light, we are observing you all the time. You're going very fast. We are looking through the telescope, and we observe changes that are happening to you all. We're listening to your heartbeat. And when we listen, as you approach the speed of light, we see there is more time. Well, perhaps I can demonstrate here. This is what it sounds like here on the Earth. Oh, no, that does not work. But there is more time between one heartbeat and the next. But when you measure your heartbeat, it is absolutely normal, just as the way it, unless you have a fast heartbeat, the same as it was on the Earth. Then we are looking carefully through the telescope, and we notice that we see you all, you are checking out your weight. You know, are you losing weight? If you need to lose weight, yeah. You think you are losing, hope you're losing a little bit. Well, from our point of view, you are losing a lot. We see that you're looking more and more like a strand of spaghetti. Yeah. Everything is contracting. The spaceship is contracting in the direction in which it is traveling. Everything inside the spaceship is also contracting, including the passengers. But for all of you, nothing is different. You seem everything is the same for you. In fact, you brought on space with you, I don't know why, it was your insistence, you wanted to bring a measuring rod, a 3 feet yardstick. Well, when we look through our powerful telescope, when you are measuring something, I don't know what you was measuring, but I will show you what we see, if I can find that. I can never find that darn, here it is. This is what we see. Yeah, well, which is the correct vision. Now, you reach your destination, and you turn around and you accelerate back to Earth. And for you, when you finally land, you're of course very excited. You want to see your family, your friends, and perhaps meet the press, yeah, to explain your experience. And perhaps from your point of view, 5 years have passed. That's how long you have been gone. So my question to all of you, and particularly to Jan, are you the same age as your twin? Are you older or are you younger? Well, I have the answer. Why don't you confer with your partner? Don't be bashful. Yeah, you don't have to worry because I come prepared. Yeah, here is the answer, and I will allow, I will invite Jan to read the answer here in the envelope. The answer, you see, yeah. Then you can read out loud for everybody to hear.
I will be younger than my stay-at-home twin.
Yeah. Perhaps for you 5 years have passed, you are 30 years old, but your twin, whose name is? Gail, is now perhaps 60 years old. I have not done the mathematics, but the point is you have entered the future. Yeah, you have, in fact, what can we conclude about, well, you are all 5 years older, and all of your friends are much, much older than you. Yeah, the aging process is slower for you. So what does that tell us about time and space? Well, you don't have to answer. You can confer with your partner. This was the essence of the theory of special relativity. There is no center to the universe. As Galileo would say, or Newton would thought, so the Earth is the center. But no, no, no. There is no center. The center is you, wherever you are. All measurements of time and space are relative to where you are and how fast you are moving. Yeah. Yeah. And here is the clincher. The faster you move, the slower time is passing. Now, at ordinary speeds, we cannot even measure these effects. It is only when you are approaching the speed of light that we can really see these operating. Although I should qualify that with very precise atomic clocks, if you put them on a what you call the plane, there is a difference in the billions of seconds because the plane is traveling faster than here. And so the time is passing more slowly on the plane than it is here. But imagine that is amplified as you approach the speed of light. Yeah? That is the essence of the special theory, the relativity special. The theory of special relativity. You see, I get confused. Yeah. And now, I don't want to put you all to sleep. Yeah, but let us see. If you like, I will take you a little bit further on the journey. Yeah. And tell you how I tried to expand that theory to encompass the whole cosmos. The theory of special relativity only applies to something that is in uniform motion. That is, it's in a straight line at the same velocity. Does not accelerate, does not slow down. Yeah? Are you with me so far? Yeah? But I wanted to expand the theory to include all kinds of motion. When you blow up a balloon and you release it, it goes every which way. Yeah? So why not include that in the theory? Took me another 10 years. It sounds simple, but they practically killed me. So 1905, I began to attract attention, and I submitted a paper to become a PhD. And the professor said, "I'm sorry, Herr Einstein, but it is too short." So I added one sentence and it passed. I become a doctor, Dr. Einstein. And I continued to work at the patent office. So I would have visitors, these prominent physicists who wanted to meet me, and they would see me sitting there behind my desk examining patents, and they thought this was an outrage. But the salary was good. And now I had 2 children to support. My relationship with Mileva was on a little shaky ground. She had these very dark moods, and she would become very angry and upset and snap her temper at me. And I found myself isolating myself from her, spending more time when I was there in my own office working on my own projects. Yeah, so at one point I get an invitation to come to Berlin to teach, to become a professor at the University of Berlin, and I would not have any teaching responsibilities. I forget what year this was, and 2 prominent scientists came to Bern, Switzerland. No, where are we living? Zurich. We had gone to Prague, and then we come back. And so I am living in Zurich now with Mileva and the boys, and I wasn't sure if I want to go to Berlin. It would mean leaving my family because my wife did not want to move to Berlin. So I told my friends, that was Max Planck, perhaps you have heard of him, and Walter Nernst. They were scientists and teaching at the university. I said to them, "Why don't you take a little tourist trip around the city? And tomorrow I will meet you here on the platform. If I have a white flower in my lapel, it means I am staying here. If I have a red flower, it means I accept your offer and I will go." So they took the little tourist train. The next morning I meet them on the platform, and what color do you think I have? I have the red flower, yeah. So I went to Berlin, and I'm working at the university, but I'm spending all of my time in my apartment trying to work out the theory of general relativity. Well, I am so occupied that I forget to eat. I only sleep when I have to sleep. I maybe sleep 2 or 3 hours a night. And then to distract myself, I will get my violin, whom I call the violin Nina. I learned to play the violin when I was young, and it is the one thing that will give me a little peace of mind. And it is also when I begin to renew my association with Elsa. She is my first cousin, Elsa Lowenstein, and we begin to see much of each other. Meanwhile, my wife is still in Zurich, Switzerland, and so I am struggling with the concept of gravity. I want to my theory to incorporate gravity. So what do you recall is gravity? Now you don't have to answer me, but you can confer with your partner. Newton would say, and he gave the world a dominating concept of gravity. He said it is the attractive force between two objects, like what? The Earth and the Moon, or the Earth and the Sun. There is this attractive force that is instantaneous between the two bodies. And that was one of his laws of motion. He said the force of gravity. He said, I don't understand what gravity is, but this is how it works. Perhaps in the future somebody else will come up with an explanation. That was me. He didn't know about it. Yeah. Well, do you see the problem with his conception of gravity? An instantaneous attraction between bodies? Well, it happens in life between two people, of course. But, for this to happen between bodies in space, this mysterious attraction, that's what we call gravity. It would have to be faster than what? The speed of light. But nothing is faster than the speed of light. Therefore, there is a hole in his theory. It can't be true. And this is what I am wrestling with. What then is gravity? Why don't we fly off into space? When we send the ball up, it falls back down. Okay, is that because of gravity? Is there a mysterious attractive force that is pulling it down to the earth? It is 1907. I am sitting by myself in my patent office. My colleagues have gone for the lunch, and I don't know what happened, but I have this flash in my mind. I suddenly see somebody jumping out of a window. I wasn't feeling bad about my life, but perhaps it was me. And I picture somebody jumping out of the window and falling to the ground without feeling his own weight. He would be weightless as he drops towards the ground. He wouldn't feel his own weight. That was an insight that came to me. He would not feel himself being pulled vigorously towards the ground. He wouldn't have any sense of his own weight. For instance, if you were to jump out of an airplane and you had a little scale attached to your feet, like you have in your bathroom, to weigh yourself. Now, when you weigh yourself inside the plane, you see you're only like 120 pounds. When you jump out of the plane and you look at the scale, 0. You are weightless. Yeah, that was one of the first insights towards the theory of general relativity. And then I had more such experiments. One time, I am in the mountains in northern Italy with my wife, Mileva, and Marie Curie. She was the founder, the discoverer of radium, and she also is brilliant, with her husband Pierre and their children. And I am not paying any attention at all to the mountains, to anything. And for some reason, I went and I grabbed a hold of Marie's arms and I said, what I need to know, Marie, is what would happen to me if I am in an elevator when the cables are broken. She said, Albert, you're crazy. Can you just enjoy the mountains and the snow and the blue sky and the children playing? No, I had to know what it would be like. So I picture myself inside an elevator. This is before there is power braking systems. And suppose there are no windows in the elevator, and I am riding. I am riding upward, and the cables that are pulling the elevator. Can you picture this? They break. All of a sudden, the elevator is plummeting toward the bottom of the building, and it is a long way down. So, like the person jumping out of the building, what am I? I am weightless. In other words, I am in free fall. If I had a ball and I dropped it, would it fall to the floor of the elevator? No, it would be in free fall too. The elevator, the passenger, and anything the passenger is dropping, all in free fall. I remember a student said, Professor Einstein, suppose I am riding in the elevator with you, and I want to spare my life when the cables break. What if at the last moment I jump up? Well, what is the problem with that solution? Your feet would have to be on the floor of the elevator, but you are in free fall. How can you jump up? You're only going to plunge. Well, that was another, I said, I took it one step further in my mind. I did not have a laboratory. This is the laboratory right here. What if the box, the elevator box, is in outer space and it is accelerating upward or it is falling towards the earth? It is in free fall. And I am inside this elevator and I am in free fall too. I am floating, you see? I am floating. Yeah, it is a wonderful feeling. But now somebody, one of my students, takes a rocket and lights the rocket. Here is the floor of the elevator, and it is dropping, and the rocket all of a sudden hits the bottom of the floor of the elevator and starts to push it upward at a certain rate, 32 feet per second squared. Okay? All of a sudden, where are my feet in the elevator? They are on the floor of the elevator. I don't know. Is it because I am in a gravitational field, or is it because I am accelerating upward? Well, that is when the light went off. Gravity and acceleration are different sides of the same coin. They are equivalent. They are equivalent. You cannot tell the difference. Like energy and matter. They are two sides of the same reality. Why have two when you can have one? Yeah. This is what I call the principle of equivalence. So we are getting closer to understanding the nature of gravity. It does not have anything to do with mysterious forces between bodies. And if that's the truth, then how do you explain why planets have an orbit? Why don't they fly off into space? That's when it occurred to me that it must have to do with the structure of space, the geometry of space. It was my old physics professor, Minkowski. When he read my paper on relativity, he said, from this day forth, we cannot separate space and time. They are part of one reality. We call it space-time. That is the reality in which we live. We don't experience this unity except as we approach the speed of light. Yeah, but ordinarily we don't. So I began to think, well, what it is about the structure of space-time? Why is it what does this have to do with the orbits of the planets and the galaxies? So I called my friend, Marcel Grossman. He was the mathematics professor. And I told him what I am thinking about, and he told me about a new branch of mathematics. I think it's called tensor mathematics. It has to do with curved. It's not geometry. Euclidean geometry is plane surfaces, yeah? But another branch is about curved space. I had to learn this new branch of mathematics. And what I concluded was that objects in space, let us say from a subatomic particle to a vast star system, it will cause an indentation in the fabric of space-time. One easy way to picture this is to imagine a trampoline, flat. Much of space is flat. You put a large weight in the middle of the trampoline, what will happen to it? It depresses, and it causes like a sloping inward, an indentation. And this is what is happening at one level in space. The sun causes an enormous warping of space-time around the edges of the sun. The same with the moon, the same with the earth. It is depressing space-time, it is causing curvature. Well, let us say here is the sun, it has caused this the space-time curvature, a warping of space-time. Along comes Albert the Earth. He is traveling in a straight line at a certain velocity. As he becomes closer to the curvature, he naturally wants to respond to the curvature. So he will travel in the straightest line possible in curved space. This is what it looks like. And we call it an orbit. Yeah. That is the straightest line in curved space. That is why planets have orbits, not because of a mysterious force, but because, well, I will tell you in very simple. Objects cause space-time to warp. And the warping of space-time tell objects how to move. That, in the essence, is gravity. And I thought one way to prove this has to do with the bending of light. Light is energy, but energy is mass. So it must also respond to the curvature of space-time. A beam of light from a distant star, as it approaches our own sun, what will it do? It must curve. Now, it is microscopic bending of the light, but I worked out the calculations, and I said what we need is a total eclipse of the sun, so we can measure the distance or the position of the stars before the eclipse and after the eclipse. And that difference is the curvature of light. Well, it was going to happen in 1914. That's when they're going to do an expedition in the Crimea during the eclipse. But what happened in August of 1914? Yeah, World War I happened, so the expedition was called off, which for me was a good thing, because I was wrong. My calculations were wrong. I forgot to take into account the curvature of space-time. So I had to wait until the war was over. Meanwhile, my student said to me, Professor Einstein, what if it turns out you're wrong? I said, well, I will feel sorry for God. because the theory is absolutely correct. When the war was over, we knew there was going to be another total eclipse in 1919. And so my Arthur Eddington, he was a cosmologist, astronomer in England, and all through the war, his colleagues were trying to convince him to debunk the German scientists, especially this guy Einstein. But he believed in me, so he launched an expedition with funding from the government. He took 2 ships, one to West Africa, one to Brazil, and during the eclipse, the solar eclipse, he took photographs. And it took 6 months for them to develop and analyze the photographs. In November 1919, they get together in London at a meeting of scientists. I wasn't there. I refused to go. Well, I didn't refuse. I was busy with other things. But the chairman of this gathering of scientists, he stood up and he said, this is one of the greatest leaps forward in human thought since the days of Isaac Newton. Yeah. It turns out that I was correct. I said the light would bend a certain amount of arc, and I was absolutely correct. It was very gratifying for me, and I think that it was one of the first and earliest proofs of my theory of general relativity. And then the next day, I don't know why, but the major newspapers in the world had headlines. Einstein says light would bend, and it did. This 40-year-old, shaggy-haired, Jewish Swiss German scientist. So all of a sudden, overnight, I become a big shot. Well, if I ever see you again and you come back to my house, I will tell you about my life from that point on. But for now, I think this is a good place for me to stop. Thank you all very much. Well, so now it is time for the questions and answers. I will ask the questions and you will provide the answers. No. So if you have any questions or comments you wish to make, yeah?
I wonder, I know it's not you, but maybe you know.
Maybe, I don't know.
A lot of the stuff I've read that you neglected or refused to give credit to your first wife for some of the early papers. Now, was that just, the glass ceiling of those days, or were you not a nice person?
If you look very carefully, you will see I have feet of clay. Yeah, I am not a perfect human being, and I did not want to give credit where I didn't think credit was due. I will say this much, that Mileva was my sounding board. We discussed my theories. She clarified, she refined the mathematics. But I felt in my heart that I am the one who originated this theory. And of course, you know, you're right. I should have credited the people on whose shoulders I was standing, including my wife, Mileva. Certainly Galileo and Newton and Faraday and Maxwell and Max Planck. All these people I am indebted to. Yeah, but you're correct. Yeah, I did many unfavorable things in my life. And I am not happy of the way I treated my wife, Mileva. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that answer.
You're
But
welcome.
did you give the other people that were working, give your money?
Well, no. Why should I give them? No.
You didn't give them any help at all.
I would give them credit when I felt the credit was due. Yeah, and I promised my wife, when I win the Nobel Prize, I will give you the winnings. This was one of the terms of our settlement for getting divorced. Yeah, we had a mediator, Fritz Haber, and that was one of the terms. And in fact, she agreed. She didn't want it at first, but then she said, well, this money will allow me to take care of myself and my children. So when I knew I was going to get the Nobel Prize, and I did, yeah. Not for the relativity, but for the photoelectric effect. But so I gave her all the winnings. Yeah, or 250,000 marks at that time. Yeah, so with it she could buy property in Zurich and get rent from the property. Yeah, but then, you know, my son Edward, he developed schizophrenia, and he spent most of his life in the sanatorium, and that was very costly. And I would write very poisonous letters to her. Why do you keep asking me about money? I have given you what I have. You want to bleed me dry? Then we don't want to go there. Yeah,
So you were born on Pi Day?
Yeah, I was born on March 14th, 1979.
That's great.
Yeah, on Pi Day. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Oh, I just have another little comment. Bruno was burned at the stake. My understanding is not because he believed in the heliocentric theory, but because he believed that the Earth really spun on its axis.
Yeah, you're perhaps correct. Yeah. The first time I went to New York with my wife Elsa, my second wife, I was mobbed by reporters asking me all kinds of questions, and I said, I don't know the answers. I don't care. If you want to know, go to the library. So perhaps you are right. Yeah, I could have gotten that little bit of history mistaken, but thank you for correcting me.
I really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Yeah.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
How many times do you do this a year as an actor?
Well, as an actor? Well, it depends on who wants me. Yeah, well, I don't know, maybe, I think last year was maybe 40 times.
Wow, great.
Yeah. But I have two.
Great job.
Thank you.
Have you done it for any high schools?
I am doing it for middle school and elementary school and university, but not high school. No? And also for senior living communities. Today I was invited to Worcester Memorial Hospital to perform for doctors. Yeah. 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 That is. Well, usually I dress myself, but yeah. You mean, yeah. Well, my wife, for Elsa, would be very helpful to help me understand what to wear to certain functions. I was not very good at that. And apparently, I am told that on my last lecture at Princeton University, the last one before I passed away, what students remember most was that I showed up disheveled looking with my shirt poking through my open fly. They don't remember what I was saying. Well, all right, I confess. No. Yeah. So I think we are finished.